Alright, this one is actually the one that I usually start the season off with, but I've been kind of trying to switch it up a little bit. This is the only adaptation of A Christmas Carol that we'll be talking about, despite the many great ones that there are. But this one has always kind of stood out to me the most. I don't know if that's a growing up with it sort of thing or what, but this has always been one of my favorite ones to go back to around this time of year. And it's also probably one of my favorite Bill Murray performances, if not my favorite one. And I know that's a really high bar, and there's a lot of things up there. But I just really love not just this movie, but especially him in it. And in this particular case, he's playing the Scrooge-esque character who runs this TV station with very sort of unconventional programming on it. Programming that pretty much fits how he views Christmas himself, starting off with this hysterical opening sequence where we see the North Pole as a Lee Majors movie called The Night the Reindeer Died, where it looks all normal and fun and Christmassy until there is an attack by, like, ninjas or something. And it turns out that the elves and Mrs. Claus at the North Pole actually have, like, an arsenal of, like, assault weapons in their, you know, little toy cabinets, and and just the whole thing, and then this series of events where we see the different promos for the station are just the perfect setup for the kind of person that Frank Ross is. And these moments that really set him up that aren't necessarily, they're over the top enough to make him really Scrooge-like, but it's also like, it's totally believable from a Bill Murray character, especially how much he kind of embodies this character so well. Going off scenes like him firing Bobcat Goldthwait, which ends up becoming an entire arc throughout the movie that we keep coming back to in sporadic moments until the final payoff at the end, which is great. And then there's also the great scene at the beginning when he's accepting a humanitarian award and it just nonchalantly leaves it behind in his cab. And it's like just these things all throughout this opening that just spell out in as clear letters as possible, this guy's a fucking douchebag. And like I said, even if these things didn't happen, just Murray's able to bring that just aura to Frank in general in such a natural way that you can just sense it. The first time we cut to him in the movie, the first thing he does is open a drawer and just wink at himself in a mirror that's in there. Just this vain exercise that likely happens multiple times a day, which just by itself says everything, but there's so much more. And then he, obviously being a Scrooge-esque character, he's got to have a Bob Cratchit character, which would be Alfred Woodard as his secretary, who's also like a real standout in this. And it's a lot of the movie for this first sort of half hour or so is really just his life as this sort of titan in TV. And this alone is intriguing enough to bring us in. And it's because you've got the whole thing where you have Robert Mitchum as like his boss, and he's got this whole idea of dogs and cats are watching TV now, and we have to, you know, act accordingly to make them entertained also, because they're going to be the future of viewers. And just the way, not only is that just a really funny character, but the way Murray plays off of him also. And the fact that it's Robert Mitchum of all people kind of stands out too. And then you've got John Glover, who's kind of Frank's goofy rival throughout the whole thing. And just these side characters that stand out and really bring like the TV aspect of the movie to life. And then you've got this whole ongoing thing in the background of this live performance they're going to put on of A Christmas Carol that stars Buddy Hackett. And just all these background details of what he does just really work in bringing this first third of the movie or so to life. And then you eventually get to where he is confronted by his Marley, who is his former boss, who is John Forsythe, who comes back as his own decaying corpse, complete with Oscar-nominated makeup. And you kind of see that throughout, but obviously the makeup is most notable on Forsythe, and it's kind of turns into this supernatural comedy when he gets these things that are leading into him being visited by the ghost. When he goes to lunch with Robert Mitchum and John Glover, and he sees like an eyeball in his glass of water, or he sees a waiter catch fire when none of the things are actually there. It's like, I'm not quite sure, it's still, no matter how many times I've seen this movie, which is at least 50, how that really connects to what's about to happen to him, and it's like if there are warnings in some way or whatever. But it still works, like I said, just by the way he can react to things, whether it's over the top, like screaming at the eyeball, or when he just kind of goes into full, almost charming his way out of a situation thing, when he just casually tells the waiter he's just doused in water. I'm sorry, I thought you were Richard Pryor. Before he slapsticks himself out of the out of the room, with one of the most perfect slip and falls I think I've ever seen in a movie, quite honestly. And then, of course, we have the three ghosts. David Johansen playing the Ghost of Christmas Past, Carol Kane playing the present, and, of course, Future is just a random hooded figure, as always. And these scenes with David Johansen are especially good, because that's another case of, like, just the back and forth works so well between the two of them, and he's such, like, this... Johansen's, like, such this wily character for this, and kind of... he's able to sort of match Frank in the way he's just the way he acts in general, and the way he's able to like complete Frank's thoughts and sentences and all that. It just kind of makes him like this perfect foil to this whole thing. But then, kind of to counter that, the first thing they do when they go to the past is go to his childhood home where his parents still are, and she's still pregnant with his younger brother. His mom is, and there is this moment where and of course the detail of Brian Doyle Murray, his brother playing him, his other brother plays his actual brother, and then his Brian Doyle Murray, his other brother, plays his father. It's a whole family affair in a very interesting way, and there's so many unspoken things in this scene that make it like actually emotionally resonant, whether it be like the way he was obviously distant from his father, and how he kind of, most likely his father is the one he ended up becoming, despite the fact that his mother was much more of a sort of prominent, loving figure in his life, because they show off his love of TV just as a child watching TV and all the different channels, which would eventually lead to him being his current job. But then there's also, like, as far as I remember, I know it's a weird thing to say about a movie I've seen like 50 or 100 times, is the fate of his mom is kind of unknown, and when exactly he lost her and how. But it's like, it apparently was early enough that his father is who he ultimately took after in, like, attitude. And so it actually becomes like this tragic thing with so many unspoken things about his life. Well, it's like, it's laying stuff out about him, but at the same time keeping a lot of it from us also, but just enough to hit those emotional beats that it actually needs to. Because that's the thing about this movie, is there is, like, it has those moments where you expect emotion, but it also, like, the heart of it is really consistent throughout also, particularly with the side characters like his brother or Grace or whoever he's terrorizing. They do that in sort of, you know, dramatic ways with like or I guess in more emotional ways with like Grace and his brother, and then also in a more comedic sense with the Bob Guy Goldthwait character. And then this eventually gets him to the Ghost of Christmas Present, who is Carol Kane, who is just goes full on with the slapstick, which is kind of a nice follow up to the emotional beats that we hit with Christmas Past. There's kind of a continuous like thing here. Like it kind of mirrors what he went through with Christmas Past, where it's revealed that this is a person that's like, or a spirit or whatever, that's kind of his match. But then we eventually hit those emotional beats after we hit all the comedic ones, and it's the same thing with Ghost of Christmas Present, where they actually start to physically get into it, and Carol Kane is amazing here. Her performance is like so lively, and I could see it maybe annoying some people, but you can tell by the way she interacts with Frank that that's probably the point. But then, like I said, we also get those emotional moments when they go to the party that his brother's having that he's not attending. And it's those moments when it's like, when he's basically defending Frank to these people, despite how we saw him treated earlier, and how he's been treated for probably most of their life together as brothers. But then we learn about, you know, the picture frame that he made by hand, that he's gifting him, and then also the moment when his wife, Wendy Malick, says, you know, when are you going to learn to like, you know, just not invite him to things or not try to, you know, get emotionally invested in him. And his response is never, because he's my brother. And it's like that just really hits in a good way, especially the way Murray plays off of it when he hears it. And there's a lot of great moments with that. The whole thing with his brother's like a really nice sort of emotional line through a lot of this stuff. And then we eventually get to Christmas Future, who is teased at first by the actor that's in the show within the movie. And there's something that I noticed this current time around that I'd never noticed in the other 50 or 100 times. That just kind of struck me as funny. And I don't even know if it's meant to be, if it's just something that's there, but the fact that Christmas Future is notoriously a character that doesn't speak, like just does not have lines, and I don't think any medium this story's been told in. Yet when Frank runs into him in the elevator, the Christmas Future is holding a script for some reason. It's like, why would he need that? So that's just some random thing that caught me as funny. And then, yeah, so they still keep up the comedic vibe, like when he looks underneath the cloak and it's like the demon faces and all that. It's funny, but then immediately Christmas Future does the job we know it's supposed to, and everything gets really, like, sort of genuinely depressing, where we see where these people could end up, most likely because of him. And it's like, obviously Karen Allen, who I've failed to mention so far, who's also kind of an emotional point for him, as like the love interest, which would seem like, you know, a boring kind of character, but the kind of natural, you know, presence she brings to this character, where we can get a sense pretty easily why he fell for her so quickly and why she's like his one weakness, regardless of how, you know, hardened he gets throughout his life. And then to see her, like, you know, turn out potentially the way she could, where it's the total and complete opposite just because of one thing he said in, like, the heat of a moment. Where it's like he's almost a normal person when he meets up with her at the shelter, and they're almost back to normal, and then it just takes one thing to turn him into an asshole again, and it completely flips everything over. And I said, well, that would be, you know, annoying and maybe a bit tropey in another movie. It just feels, you know, true to his character that it's that easy to turn him back into an asshole when it seems like he might be turning around a little bit, showing some form of humanity. And yeah, and then eventually, and we have, obviously with Alfred Woodard being the Bob Cratchit character, she has her own Tiny Tim, also the little boy who was her son, who hasn't spoken since he saw his father and her husband murdered. And so that's kind of a dark angle to take that also, but also kind of a fitting one when you're updating it. And then eventually we get to the fact that it's one thing that the story is usually he gets taken to a cemetery and there's the tombstone, but this one takes the step further and he's watching himself and eventually living out his potential inevitable cremation, which is just kind of the extra level to take that to where it's totally believable that when this is all over he feels like it's not just, oh, he feels alive, but how trapped he felt, how he was not just, you know, witnessing that he had died, but that he was witnessing his actual, like way in the moment still, like really fresh into it, and it's this whole other thing that it's refreshing when he comes out and he's a new person, and how believable Murray makes this turnaround, because when you look at the beginning parts of the movie, like I was talking about with the humanitarian award, or when he fires Bobcat Goldthwait, or when he tears the picture off the wall because it has 11 fingers, the stick person has 11 fingers. We talked about this with Billy Bob Thornton and Bad Santa, and you can even take this to what we talked about with James Caan and Elf, and that is the way that Murray is able to play this despicable person while also making the character funny, to where we're invested in him enough that when that time comes and he does make that turnaround, it works. But it's also like, it's not just us saying, you know, wow, what a douchebag. It's like we can get a lot of like almost guilty laughs out of it because of the way he plays it. One scene in particular that stands out is when his really insane ad for Scrooge has nothing to do with Scrooge whatsoever. It has like exploding planes and people getting shot on the highway and people shooting up. And this apparently kills an old lady while she's watching it. And when he's told this, at first it could be mistaken as a reaction of like remorse, until we realize that he is absolutely stoked about the free publicity this is going to be. And it's like, in any other movie with any other character, that would be a point of no return. Like, I do not care. Like, he might as well have killed somebody. But the way it's played off works within the movie. Like, that's not something every movie can pull off. But I think especially the way Murray can pull off that kind of thing is really crucial here. So as far as I think the casting alone is what got them away with that, and actually got the audience to the end safely. And there's the whole continuing thing about him, like, throughout the movie, he seems to be verging on alcoholism, if he's not there already. I love that moment towards the end, just before Christmas Future, when he's got the glass of whatever he's drinking, and he just puts the almost non-existent dab of tab into it. And then there's a couple of just brilliant scenes with him. I love Murray in this scene when it's between Christmas Past and Christmas Present, when he's going to the shelter to see Claire, and he starts to talk to himself, and he walks and talks to himself, starting at the set, and then all the way up the road, all the way down the sidewalk, all the way until he gets to the shelter, and still, when he walks into the shelter, to the point that the people there mistake him for an insane homeless person. And just that whole segment of just him walking and talking to himself is amazing. And even when he gets there, Michael J. Pollard and Anna Ramsey and all of them are there to encourage him, and they mistake him for Richard Burton. And then he does like a little kind of Burton monologue there. That whole thing is just perfect also. Michael J. Pollard, who plays Herman, the tragic death in the middle, which is unfortunately timed because we also just unfortunately lost him, like, what was that, last month? And that really sucks. But, so yeah. And then eventually we get to the final scene where everything turns around and Frank's gone through everything, and now he's trying to be an inspirational person as much as he can. And like I was saying, this is the part where it's like, we know A Christmas Carol, so we know this part is coming, and it'll feel cliche because we know the terrible person is going to turn another leaf and all that. And it's like, unlike Willie and Bad Santa, this is like a total and complete change. He is an entirely different person now. And it's like, you normally dismiss it and say, well, this is that scene, and he would say, like, hey, I'm a different person now, and I love Claire, and the kids talking again, and I'm friendly with kids now, I'm going to be friendly to my secretary, the end. But this scene goes on for a very long time, and that's not a complaint. Because this character is such a terrible person, they've really, really got to sell that he's changed, and I think this scene goes on just long enough to make that believable. And it's a brilliant scene from Murray. It's probably one of the best scenes in Murray's career, is this whole 10 minutes or so of just him going off about how amazing Christmas is and how amazing people are and the amazing things we can do with the smallest of gestures, and it's this whole thing. I said, it's the whole cliche thing we're waiting the movie for, but the movie takes it so above and beyond what it needs to get the point across, and that's what works about it. I think the only thing that sticks out to me that I hate about this scene is, it's just a nitpick, obviously, but it's when Claire leaves the shelter to go to the studio, and of course she gets picked up by the Ghost of Christmas Past. And it's when she says that she needs to go get to that building, and we cut to him and he says, which floor? And we need to cut to him because we need to reveal that it's him. But it's like, there's no fucking reason a cab driver's asking you what floor you're going to when he's driving you to a building. I think hop in would have worked just as well. But that's the only thing that bothers me about that scene. So, like I said, the way it goes on and all, it's not half-assed in any way, like the typical turnaround, inspirational moment in the Christmas movie, where there's always the moment in the Christmas movie where people talk about the true meaning of Christmas. And as kids, and maybe some adults, that's always the, yeah, whatever part of the Christmas movie. But that is true, though, because what's interesting is, it's weird to say this about a comedy and about a character that is so, brutal in his opening scenes, But dare I say, this whole monologue with Murray actually is like genuinely inspirational in a way. So, like I said, the more it goes on, the more it sells his change and makes it believable. And it's, yeah, so it's just really, really great stuff. So I would have honestly given like Murray all the awards for this, quite honestly. So for the walk to the shelter alone, for the ending monologue alone, for all the times he's a complete and total dickhead alone, and it's so many great things in one performance, and it's fantastic, and really is the main thing that makes this movie so great. But there are a lot of things that make this movie great, as we talked about. So I think that's it for this one. I'm not entirely sure what the next one is, but I will get that figured out in the next day or two. Obviously, the next video is going to be the Friday reviews. So, yeah, but then we'll probably pick up shortly after that. So, until all of that stuff, I think that's it for this.